Hey, good morning. Good to see you online, Overflow, Coffee Shop, up top. Hey, good to have you here today. We're celebrating 9 years as a church today, and I am just so excited at just God's faithfulness. You know, as I think back for our church 9 years ago to our official kind of launch Sunday, I had no idea what it would look like. I had no idea what God would do, but I can tell you this, it has been more than I could ever imagine. We could call it an overflow. And for our theme this year as a church, one of the things that I want us to focus on just throughout this entire year, as you read Colossians 2:7, it talks about the roots that you have, and it says that it should grow down deep in Christ, so that when those roots grow down deep in Christ, the love will overflow into your life. And so I want you to think about it like this, that whatever your roots are in your life, whatever you've dug your roots into, that will overflow in your life. If you've dug your roots into materialism, you're gonna find that will be debt. If you dig your roots into whatever it is, that's gonna overflow in your life. And so those things determine what comes out of your life. And so we wanna help you build your life on Jesus so that that will overflow and show in your life. So today we're kicking off a new series called Knotty, a little play on words for you there. And we are talking about relationships. And it's been a couple of years since I've done a relationship series. So I just thought, man, this would be a great opportunity to be able to do that. We haven't done that in a while. And so wherever you're at today, this is gonna apply to you, whether you're married and things are going well, whether you're married and hey, you got a lot of tension in your marriage, if you're divorced, if you're dating, if you're single, maybe you're just here, you're just all about friendships or whatever in the latter part of your years, this is going to apply to you just across the board as we talk about relationships. And I love what Ecclesiastes says in Ecclesiastes 4:12, would kind of be the main verse for this series, that a person standing alone can be attacked and defeated. And I think one of the problems in our culture today is so many of us are trying to do life alone. You're trying to do life alone. And it says in scriptures that we have an enemy who's roaring around like a lion. He's prowling around looking for prey. And lions, if you know about them, they always pick off the ones that are isolated, the ones that are weak, the ones that are alone. And here we have the wisdom of Solomon. He says a person who's alone can be attacked, and not only can be attacked, they could be defeated. It says, but two can stand back to back and conquer. So in other words, there's a lot to be said about having that relationship with Christ and who that person is. But then he says, three are even better, for a triple braided cord, a knot, is not easily broken. And when you think about this, when it comes to relationships, we think about the fact that there should be three people, three parts to your marriage today. I know that's kind of weird. We're like, hey, we're getting into like weird sister wife stuff today, right? But what we're talking about is God's first. God has to be first. If you're here and you're a follower of Christ, God has to be first. And if this is not a priority in your life, now obviously you get the pass today, you're at church, so you've shown God is first, but we're talking about every single day. If God isn't first in your relationships, in any relationship, whether you have friends, if you're just dating, whatever, God isn't first, you're gonna find that as your priorities are out of whack, you're gonna find that your relationships begin to crumble as well. God has to be first. I always think it's funny that your spouse is second. Sometimes your spouse is number two, you know? And that's the way it's gotta be. Spouse comes after God. If you put your spouse before God, again, you're gonna find that troubles are gonna head your way. And then the third thing is then yourself, right? So it's God, spouse, and then, family or whatever else after that. Now, I have met with and counsel lots of couples. I do that, and typically what it works, when a couple says, hey, pastor, we need to meet, or having some issues in your marriage, I will always meet with any couple that asks. So if you're here today and you need help, I would be more than happy to sit down and meet with you. And I always just hear what's going on. And then I always typically, especially if it's marital, always suggest, hey, I think now you need like a professional in this world, a counselor who can help do that for you. And I want to help you in your relationship. And I think the best way to do that is to meet with a marriage counselor. And I'm very big on that because I've seen too many couples in our church and just in general where the relationships fall apart. And a lot of times it's the foundation on which you're building your relationships. Aaron and I, we've been married for 15 years. And there was a time where I was like so many of you today. We were in trouble. Our ship was sinking. And I didn't ask anyone for help. I didn't think I could ask for help. I didn't think I could reach out and say, hey, things are not going so well. Everyone else thinks our relationship was good. Hey, our Instagram picture looks great, but the reality, the behind the scenes of what's going on in my real life, this is not good. I was trying to think through what would it look like to separate from her, and then what would it be with our kids, and there was just all these things like, I don't think we're gonna make it. But then reaching out and getting help was the best thing that we've ever done. And it changed our relationship completely. We're stronger today doesn't mean that she's still not wrong. She's still wrong. I just don't let her know all the time, right? It saved our marriage, and I'm so passionate about trying to help you save yours as well. I love what Craig Rochelle says. He says, getting a divorce because you ran out of love is like saying you're selling your car because you ran out of gas. You need to spend time filling it up. Hey, some of us, you fell out of love. Well, listen, you can't, I know like Alicia Keys, you keep falling in and out of love. But I'm telling you, it's something so much different. It's not the grass is greener on the other side. It's just time to start watering your own lawn. And so if you've been divorced, hey, this is not a knock on you. Like, let's just start where you're at today, all right? We don't need to dwell on the past. Let's learn from mistakes, and then let's move forward. For those of you that are married today, let's realize that your relationships, you will get as much as you put into it. And so if you're not spending time with your spouse, if you're not spending time with each other, don't be surprised when it feels like you ran out of love. You just ran out of time for each other, and you've got to rearrange your priorities. And so they say, studies have countlessly shown time and time again that most couples from the years 7 to 10, that's when the most divorces happen. If you've been married 7 to 10 years, specifically years 7 and 8. Why? Usually because the first 5 years are pretty good, and after 5 years, you got the real them. Like the real them. You know, all the stuff that you thought was good at the beginning now annoys you. You know what I'm talking about? You got the real person at 5 years in. And at 5 years in, things start to unravel a little bit. We let our guard down, and years 7 and 8 are the most difficult. If you can make it to 10 years, it declines a little bit. But then, don't hold out hope, because empty nesters are the next age bracket where divorce skyrockets again. Because you've spent all of your life putting your kids before your spouse, and then you wake up to that person going, who are you? Who are you? And people end up splitting up and leaving. So we want to be able to help you. I want to be able to show you what it's like to have a triple braided cord, a knot. You tied the knot, now what? There's a book I would love for you to pick up. It's super short. It's called The Marriage Knot. And it's just 7 choices that keep couples together. It's super easy read. I would encourage you to pick it up. Even if you're not married, this is a great book to look at and say, this is the kind of person that I want to be. And if you're here today and you're saying, Pastor, I would love to have one. I just can't, afford to get one or whatever right now. Hey, write on a connection card. Hey, I would like marriage book or whatever, just marriage book. And we'll hook you up. We'll make sure you get one of these, this week. I would love to get one in your hands. All right, so today we want to talk about unconditional love. We want to talk about unconditional love. Again, this will apply to anyone in the room. If you're a human being, then love is something that we want to do towards all people. So we say it like this. Love is not all about attraction. Love is not all about looking hot. It's not all about looking good. It's not all about swiping right? Love responds with action. Love responds with action. And I can sit here confidently and tell you that, when I was I moved to Alabama, and I was like, thank God, the Lord sent me to Alabama, you know what I mean? And I was like, man, I'm just praying for the right girl. And I prayed for 3 G's, all right? And if you're single, you can have this prayer too. It's just my prayer, all right? So it's totally just something I made up. It's not biblical, but I do think there's something special about 3 G's. First off, the girl I was looking for had to be godly. That's important, right? Her faith in God. Is she godly? Well, Aaron, check number 1, godly. Hey, number 2, she had to be good looking. You know what I mean? You don't want to be married to someone you'll do. You know what I'm saying? You want to be attracted to the person that you're going to marry. I think that's important at first, that initial attraction. I think, to me, that was important. Aaron, check that box. The third G, this is most important to me, was gravy. Can she make gravy? Hey, rice and gravy, biscuits and gravy. The best part of Thanksgiving, the gravy, right? So that girl knows how to make some gravy. Her mama taught her right. So she had those three G's. And so, we got married. And I always like to say this, I will always do premarital counseling. If I'm gonna marry a couple, I always say like, hey, I wanna sit down, let's do counseling together. We go through these sessions. And I always tell them this thing. I said, do you know how I know I was supposed to marry my wife? Like, do you know how I knew that I was supposed to marry her? And it builds up this whole thing. They're like, I don't know, how did you know? I married her. That's how you know. When you marry that person, that's the person you're supposed to marry. There's not the one out there for you, because a lot of you done screwed that up for everybody else, all right? It's about who you marry, all right? And then from there, it's all about choices. But let me tell you something, beauty is a depreciating value, right? Our bodies are completely changing. Although I feel like I've hit my prime, I just turned 40, you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like the bar has moved. 40 is the new 30s, right? It's changed a lot. I actually have a picture here of Aaron and I on our wedding day, right? So 15 years ago, right? I feel like we look good, but at the same time, a lot has changed. My shoulders are broader now, you know what I mean? I've gotten, as they say in the South, fattened up a little bit, right? You can change that picture now, all right? But it's different. We are different. Like, we're totally different people. 15 years of life. Like, it is not the same. I was 24 years old when we took that picture, and a lot of my life has changed. We could just say, like, life changed me. Kids will change you. Being a pastor changed you. Being married will change you. My metabolism changed. It's not the same. God changed me. And the same is true for my wife, Erin. Like, the same is true for her. She's a different person. And I've noticed, like, just women, like, when you have kids, this is crazy, but like, man, that changes you every single time too. Like, there's a lot, like, you change a lot in relationships, and the person you married usually isn't the person you're still married to. There's going to be differences, which means your relationship has to grow as well. So how do you move to a love that's unconditional to something that's just more than a feeling, more than a feeling? Come on, I got some Gen Zers up in here. Boston, sometimes I hit like the hip hop, but today I'm hooking you up. It's more than, a funny side story, all right? I was working at Sears when I was in high school. Remember when Sears existed? All right, some of you Gen Zs have no idea. It was a store, it was a department store. And I worked in electronics, of course. And we had this song, like this CD that played like every day. It like had like 12 tracks on it. Anyways, More Than the Feeling was on there. And I was like, yo, this, I'd like never heard it before because I grew up independent Baptist. Like we weren't allowed to listen to anything besides hymns. And I was like, this is one of the best songs I ever heard in my life. So that's like the only song from that generation I like. But I'm just saying, like, it means something to me. It means something to me. Here's what I want to do for the rest of our time today. I want to look at today the most famous chapter written on love. And we're going to kind of break it down a little bit, and then I just want to give us 5 quick tips that I think will help any relationship, help you love someone unconditionally. So if you're here, again, wherever you're at, I believe this chapter, when we break it down, is going to apply to any relationship you have, relationships at work, relationships with your neighbors, relationships with your in-laws, relationships with your kids, and of course, relationship with your spouse if you are married. It'll be in 1 Corinthians 13. Paul writes this chapter, and it gets read at so many funerals, or not funerals, but it feels like that sometimes, all right? Some marriages are like, no, this is not good. No, it's read at some, we're not even using the service now, all right? We're going to have to. If you're watching this and you're hearing this, like, there's a glitch, right? We're using second service now. All right. It's used at so many weddings, and yet he's talking about something that's not really pertaining to marriages specifically. He's talking about just relationships in general. And I love what Paul writes. Listen to what he says. He says in verse 1 of chapter 13, he says, if I could speak all the languages of earth and of angels, but I didn't love others, I would only be a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I had the gift of prophecy, and if I understood all of God's secrets, plans, and possessed all knowledge, and if I had such faith that I could move mountains, but I didn't love others, I would be nothing. If I gave everything I have to the poor and even sacrificed my body, I could boast about it. But if I didn't love others, I would have gained nothing. So really, this idea in these first three verses that Paul is talking about, he's saying that relationships thrive on love. Relationships thrive on love. Think about it. When it comes to love, in American culture, we only have just like the word love. And we can use the word love in so many ways to mean so many different things, right? Like there's just sometimes like I love like a good old double cheeseburger, smash burger. Like I love that. But it's different when I say I love that and I love my wife. That level of love is different, but it's the same word, love. Now, see, when you read in Scripture, and I can kind of break it down for you, there's like 3 levels of love. Like, so you're here today, and you love people at one of 3 levels. The first level of love, we call it like, it's just the bottom tier level of love. It's a selfish love. It's, I love you for what I can get from you. It's all about me. I love the cheeseburger because the way it tastes, right? I love that feeling when I bite into like that kind of love. It's all a selfishness. I love you because you're attractive. I love you because you have lots of money. I love you because whatever. You fill in the blank. I love you, and the love is all about selfishness. And that's typically nothing wrong with this, but most relationships start off at a selfish level of love because you're attracted to the other person. You're trying to do all that you can to win them over. It's a selfish kind of love. We would call that level 1. That's just basic level of love. If you love something just off the bat, it's usually because you're getting something for yourself. It brings you some type of joy. The second level of love, you're kind of building on that next tier. If you kind of make it past a selfish love, you kind of get to level 2. It's a bargaining kind of love. This is all about, I will do this for you if you do this for me, right? Sometimes we do that in relationships. Like, well, I'll buy this for you if you buy this for me. Hey, we can go on this trip here if we go this thing here. Well, we'll go with your family this time if we do this thing with my family next time. It's all about the bargain. Give me this, I'll give you that. It's a trade-off, and that is what we call bargaining kind of love. So many of us feel like that around the house. Well, I'll do this if you do that. And even though we don't say it, it's the way that we actually live the relationship. But then the level that we're going for, the level that all of us want, the level that we want to be experienced is the third level. We call that an unconditional love. The Bible calls that word agape, an agape love. It's this love that says, I know everything about you, and I still love you. Like, I know the things that would scare most people away, and I'm still choosing to be right here. It's a New Testament kind of love. It's totally different. It's how Jesus gave his life and said, hey, even though some of you will still reject me, I'm still choosing to lay down my life. That is what we call an agape love. See, this kind of relationship is 100-100. You see, this is what's so broken about most relationships. It's like, well, it's 50-50, and that's why your relationship is 50-50. But if you give 100-100, that says this, even on my spouse's worst days, and I feel like they're giving 0, the relationship is still whole because I'm giving 100. I didn't say it was fair. I didn't say that it was easy. But what I'm telling you is when you can live through the lens of 100-100, it will change your relationship because you're going to have bad days. You're going to have these times where you just blow it. But this is the litmus test to kind of see where you're at in the relationship. And then Paul continues to kind of go down because, like, if you really think about it, how often do you put the other person first? I never thought I was selfish until I got married. And I was like, oh, like you learn things about yourself you didn't know. Like I didn't know that I snored until I got married. I'm like, that's a lie. Like, you're a lie. And then she recorded me, right? I'm like, I guess I do. I guess I do. I didn't know that. I'm sorry. I don't know. Like that's DNA. I can't help that, right? There's lots of things you learn about yourself, but it's how often am I choosing to put the other person first? And then we were married for 9 months. We got pregnant. We had kids pretty early. And then like having babies, man, I didn't realize how selfish it was because those things like need stuff all the time. You know what I'm saying? They need stuff all the time. I'm like, well, can they feed themselves yet? You know what I mean? Can you do whatever? They're so reliant on you. I didn't realize how selfish I actually was, but where are you at on that? Constantly putting the other person first. Man, that's difficult, but yet that is what true, unconditional agape love is. That's what we all want, but yet so often it's what most of us refuse to do. So Paul goes on, and we're going to break this list down, and you know it. If you've been in church, you've been to a wedding, like you've heard these words, but let's just break it down a little bit, because he goes on in verse 4, and he says this: love is patient. Love is patient. That means it's the ability to be wronged and not retaliate. You do something to me, well, I'm about to get you back. You say this to me, I say this to you. Oh, you're gonna low blow me, then I'll low blow you, right? But it's the ability to be wronged by someone and not retaliate. Love is patient. Man, that's tough. I experience that now with my middle school son. Patience. Because like you say something to me, boy, I will knock you silly, right? Koreans are good at the backhand, you know what I mean? Like, oh. Love is patient. Are you patient with that other person? How patient are you with your spouse? How patient are you with others? That's my problem, is I show way more grace and patience to people I really don't know or friends or whatever than I do to people in my own family. That's the real test. How patient are you with those that are closest to you? And how patient would they say you actually are to them? He says, love is patient. Then Paul goes on, he says, love is kind. Love is kind. Kind is this type of love that we're saying is being tender and compassionate towards others. Now think about those words, tender and compassionate. Like men, we understand this in the dating phase. You know, like, I always think it's funny, but you know how it is. Like, you're calling your girl, right? And like dudes, we go into like, our girl, like this is my relationship voice. It's like you talking to guys like, yeah, that's what's up. You know, we gonna play this game. Your girl comes, she's like, hey, baby. You know how like your voice goes like up an octave falsetto? You know what I mean? Like, nah, girl, I was just thinking about you. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I'm talking about. We laugh because it's true. We all have that voice. We get married and stuff, we're like, what? What? We were at the vet yesterday. Like, we're in like this room, like it's a tiny room, right? It's not even as big as this stage, and this guy shows up and he's asking questions about his pet. They're asking him questions about his pet. It was obvious his wife had sent him. Dude calls his wife on speakerphone. I'm like, oh, this is good. Of course I recorded that, right? Sitting there, he's got his wife on speakerphone, and he's asking questions like, hey, who'd you talk to here? She's like, what? He's like, well, who'd you talk to here? She's like, what are you talking about? Like, at the vet, like, who did you talk to? She's like, I didn't talk to anybody. I just sent you. And he's like, oh my gosh, and he's signing this whole thing. He's like, hey, you need to calm down. You're on speakerphone. She's like, why did you put me on speakerphone? Like, it's a whole conversation. Like, you can't make this stuff up. Only in Gadsden, Alabama, right? Like, this is amazing. This was amazing. Like, this whole thing, like, dude was like, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you already know in your head what I'm saying. He's had a little more twang to, you know what I'm saying? Like, so it was just hilarious, right? We kind of let our guard down, but yet we're talking about like a tenderness, a compassionate, like having compassion towards our spouse, having compassion towards other people. And it's difficult to maintain that kindness. Man, there are some of you, it's like every day you put on boxing gloves. You just can't wait to jack the person right in the face. And we do that with our words. We do that with our attitudes, right? Like love, it says it's kind. It's kind. And honestly, it's difficult to be tender and compassionate in moments of friction in any relationship. But yet Paul says, no, love, like true love, the love that you and I want, it's kind. You were wronged. They wronged you. They said that thing to you. They hurt you. It was kind of a shot to the gut, but you don't have to retaliate. That is unconditional love. That's what he's talking about there. And he goes on, he keeps saying that. He says, all right, so already, I don't know about you, I already have problems with the first two. We're only like one sentence in, and the sentence is 5 words. Then he says, love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. In other words, we kind of say that this is kind of love that is sincere. This is a sincere love, a relationship, check this out, free of what? Envy. True agape love is a relationship free of envy. Think about that. So many of us, we're envious of our spouses towards things. It could be like that friend they hang out with. It could be the phone, like you're like envious that they spend so much time on the phone. It could be like that person. It could be like that coworker or whatever. Like we can be envious of our relationships and we get frustrated with people, and yet we're talking about like this kind of love. It's a sincere kind of love. True agape love is a relationship free of envy. There's freedom there. It's a complete trust of like, I know this person completely. I know that they wouldn't do this thing to me, and I have no envy in my relationship. Paul continues on. It's getting a little more difficult. He says, it does not demand its own way. Love does not demand its own way. In other words, love is not demanding. It's unselfish and sacrificial. Yo, and here's the thing, like if you're married and you're like guys for a second, whether you want it or not, you are the leader. And I'm not saying like women can't be leaders because like, hey, we have some strong men, they should be able to do all the, like I'm not saying any of that, but I'm talking about you are responsible for the spirituality of your family. How you lead your spouse, how you lead your kids, how you lead your kids, guess what? That all falls on your shoulders. God will not have you and your spouse there at the end of it all and say, hey, well, she did great, and what were you doing? Like, well, it was her. No. He's looking at you for how you lead your family. So it's up to us, and like, what are we doing? It's not demanding. So like, what are you willing in your relationship to give up? You know, I think this is crazy. Like, a lot of us, like, we like different hobbies and things we like to do. And, you know, a lot of times it's like, man, you know, in relationships, we just feel like we have to give stuff up to be married. It's like, golly, I got to give this up. Can't do this anymore. Can't go to the hunting club as much as I want to anymore. Yeah, because that deer means more than your wife does. You're like, in that moment it does. That 10-point does. You know what I mean? But yet, would you be willing to let it go for the sake of your marriage? See, that's the test of true love right there. Are you really willing to give up the things that are extras to spend time with a person who you said face to face, I do, through ups and downs, I do, I solemnly swear in front of everybody. But now that like it's real life, are you willing to go back to those vows you said and say, I'm willing to give up all of that? Like, I don't need this job. I don't need this thing. I'll find something else. I'm going to be in community. I'm going to like make sure we're in church. I'm going to grow. I'm going to make sure we're surrounded by people that are going to help us go the direction that we want to go in life. Like, I'm willing to give up all of that stuff because you mean more to me than anything. If you can't say that, then you can't say you love unconditionally. That's what Paul says right here. It's not demanding. How many times do we demand things of our spouses? How many times do we demand things of other people, and yet we turn around and say, I love you as long as you do that thing that I asked you to do? And yet Paul says here, it's not demanding. And he goes on, hey, you having a problem with this list? I know I am. He says, it is not irritable. Love is not irritable. It keeps, this one's going to be fun for some of us, no record of being wronged. We keep in Rolodexes. That's like Gen Z don't even know what that means. We're keeping like notes on our iPhone about all the wrongs that have been wrong to us. We got like, we keeping reminders. Like, next argument, can't wait to bust that one out. Right? It says it keeps no record of wrong. In other words, like love is forgiving. It's the glue that holds relationships together. Forgiveness. It's like, hey, I forgive you. Like, I understand this. I'm not going to invite bitterness by refusing to forgive. And that doesn't mean you're condoning sin. It just means you pardon it. You pardon it, saying like, hey, you've wronged me, but I'm not holding this thing against you. It's not excusing their behavior. It's exposing the condition of your heart, and you're going to help them through. Verse 6, it says this, it does not rejoice about injustice, but it rejoices whenever the truth wins out. So in other words, love is truthful. It's about bringing honesty to the table, not deception. Some of us, we're secretive in our relationships. We have spending habits we don't want our spouse to know. We have credit cards they don't know about. We're doing things. We're talking to people they don't know we're talking to. Like, hey, we've decided that some things, like we don't want our location turned on so they can know where we're at right now in this moment because they really wouldn't like where we're at in this place. It says love is truthful. In other words, deception just loosens the knot of any relationship. Verse 7, he says this, love never gives up. It never gives up. It never loses faith. It is always hopeful, and it endures through every single circumstance. We say love is everlasting, something that lasts forever. And this is God. His love lasts forever. You can never lose it. Once he gives it to you, it's completely yours, 100%. He gives it to you. He does not take that away. So don't give up. Here's the caveat to that in relationships. If you're being abused, you need to get out. And we will help you because no person, man or woman, should be in an abusive relationship, okay? But we're talking like most of us are not dealing with abuse. We're just talking about like the other person's just a jerk. That's just the honest truth. It doesn't give up. And you work through the issues. And you're going to say, hey, we're going to fight through this. I'm fighting for you. I'm going to do my part. And hey, that other person, you can't be responsible for what they do, but you can do your part. You can do the thing that only you can do. So we're going to close out really quickly. These parts will be very quick, but it'll be in your worship guide. How to love unconditionally. Again, any relationship, this will be good for you, all right? There's 5 things that you can do in any relationship that will help you grow in loving someone unconditionally. Here's the first one. It's going to be tough for most of us. Be willing to admit you're wrong. Be willing to admit you're wrong. That's self-explanatory. This is not the same as admitting fault. Just own up to your mistakes. Hey, if you messed up, say it. Be willing to admit you're wrong. Here's the second thought. Be willing to share your burdens. Be willing to share your burdens. Be open. Quit isolating yourself in your relationships. If you're struggling, if you're going through a tough time, don't say, we'll get through it together. No, you need community. That is the lie the enemy is telling you. You need other people who want to rally around you, who will help you out in your relationship, right? So this is going to be better for you at sharing those things, share your burdens with other people. And men, like this is something like for you as you are sharing your burdens. Sometimes your wife's trying to draw you out. You have to do this thing called talk about the thing you hate talking about, your emotions. And whatever broken thing is in you from your childhood, from your dad that told you not to share it, it's time to man up and start talking about what's going on inside your heart. Your wife is receiving the brunt of you not talking. We got to start talking to each other. Real conversation, sharing your burdens, share your frustrations, share your fears, share your insecurities. Have those vulnerable moments. If you can't do that with your spouse, then maybe you don't love them as much as you say you do. It's time to have those conversations. Be willing to embrace your weaknesses. This is going to really be tough for some of us really arrogant people here. Narcissists don't think you have weaknesses, but every single person in this room does. We all have weaknesses. And as a matter of fact, you have more than one. I have tons of weaknesses. And it's okay to have weaknesses. That's why God gave you your spouse. Typically, you're going to find that they have strengths in areas that you don't. Right? That's why the two, they become one. So then we kind of brings us to our fourth thought. Be willing to leverage your strengths. Leverage your strengths. Your marriage is strong when you both focus on your strengths. Hey, here are the things that I do well. Here are the things that you do well. I do the budget. Erin plans all of our meals, and she does the grocery shopping. Like, it would be horrible. A lot more spam in my house if it was up to me, right? But like, that would be me. And yet she's in charge. And so we leverage our strengths to work together to come out to the place that's going to, hey, so we kind of say it like, stay in your lane. Some of us just need to stay in our lanes and let our spouse do what they can do and have those conversations and leveraging your strengths. Here's the fifth thought. Be willing to celebrate your differences. Be willing to celebrate your differences. Erin and I, we both come from Southern homes. Hers is Alabama, mine is Korean. But yet we're both Southern, just differently. And yet we have learned, like her family upbringing, all one family, they go to like everybody's like birthday parties and like this is like 3 cousins deep. Like, I don't even think you really know them, right? Do we have to go to that? And like my family was like so spread apart, like barely see them. I could call my parents 2 or 3 times a year and like, we're good. Like, not that we hate, that's our families. It's different. It's different. And we have learned to celebrate the differences in our upbringings, in our cultures, in our stories, and said, it's really cool, like we can embrace that together. Like my family loves to drive to Duluth in Georgia. That is, in case you didn't know, that's Koreatown. It's the second largest population of Korean culture in America outside of LA. And I love that like my wife has embraced that culture, loves the food, she cooks it, and we have a great time. And it's like something we can celebrate together, and like, fishing with her parents and her dad and these spots that he would do. Like, man, we have embraced the culture with each other, and we learn that we have to celebrate each other. Hey, some of our relationships would just do so much better if we could just start celebrating the other person. Celebrate them. They got the promotion you didn't, celebrate them. Don't make it about you, because it's not about you. Spouse comes before you. Learn to celebrate each other. So where are you at? We talked about a lot today, and I know it's difficult, especially if you're in a relationship right now that's struggling. So this is not like a condemnation thing. It's just a gut check to say, where am I, and what can I do? Because from a message like this, we're going to have a next step. That next step for you might be like, I need to reach out, and we need to get some help. It's time to stop talking. It's time we saw a counselor. Hey, maybe that next step for you is like, hey, we need to get that book. We should read it and go through it together. Maybe for you, it's like we need to get plugged into community. I know we got small groups coming up, and maybe you just say like, hey, let's stop talking about it. Like, let's really get plugged in, because whatever your roots are in, whatever you dig your roots into in your relationship, that will overflow into your life. Let's pray.